Stampers, welcome to my craft room. Today I would like to show you how to make this beautiful background using some art supplies that you may actually have lying around your craft room. And to make this background we're actually going to use some gesso. It doesn't matter what brand you use, but we are going to use some white gesso. Place a little bit of gesso. I use a yogurt lid. You can use a paint palette, whatever works for you. And I use a little sponge that I have. And we're going to take the artistic etching stamp set. And I really like this beautiful line image. We're also going to take a piece of Sahara sand cardstock. This piece is 5 1/4 by 4 inches. We're going to set that on the scratch piece of paper. Get that out. And we're going to go ahead and pick up a little bit of the gesso. We're going to turn our stamp over and actually pat the gesso onto our stamp. Don't worry, this can be washed off with water, and I also use a toothbrush to kind of get in the edges. Then we're just going to randomly stamp. You can stamp once, you'll get a really nice thick image. You can stamp again, it'll be a little bit lighter. And you're going to keep doing this until you get your full piece fully coated. It does take a little bit of time for this gesso to dry. However, you can always bring in your heat tool to dry the gesso quite quickly. So once it's dry, we're going to go ahead and take our cherry cobbler. And I'm going to come ahead and take another sponge that I have for my cherry cobbler ink. We're going to pick up some ink onto our sponge, and then just in a light circular motion we're going to go ahead and put this ink all over this gessoed piece. And it starts to really pop the texture of the gesso. The gesso is somewhat raised, and it really gives us a great textured and mottled look. I also like to go ahead, after I've gotten that fully coated, I like to go ahead and sponge the edges so that they're a little bit darker than the rest of this piece of Sahara sand. And then the other thing I really like to do, which is going to change the look of this totally, again just a little bit more ink, is I like to take a combination of two things. I take a little bit of my shimmer paint. I'm using Champagne Mist shimmer paint here. Place it into a little bottle with some alcohol. You can use this kind of small mister, you can use a little spray bottle, and then I like to mix that up together. This is a great way to create your own smooch spritz or your own shimmer spritz. I have a great box that I use for this technique so that I can not create a huge mess. Go ahead and just place your piece of paper into a covered surface. And then I go ahead and I spray about 5 or 6 times, and you can see what this is doing to this stamped and gessoed piece of paper. It's kind of making the ink a little bit wet, giving it a more mottled look. And then I do go ahead and use my heat tool to make this dry. And I actually dry it a little bit on this side. You'll see that it does curl a little bit as it's drying. And then I flip it over and actually dry the other side to try and get it to lay down a little bit. But that way we have this nice gessoed background. And now the background also has a nice little bit of sparkle. Hopefully you can see that. Another piece of Baja Breeze cardstock. I believe this piece is 2 3/4 by 3, and went ahead and rounded the corners. I use this corner rounder. You can use whatever corner rounder you happen to have. Then, of course, I take my Baja Breeze ink and go ahead and sponge around the edges of this rounded piece of cardstock. It's hard to tell how much definition that really is providing until you put it onto another color. And my sense is that by sponging your edges, you really get those edges to pop. That layer is going to pop right off of the page. Then I took my greeting, which is from the Because I Care stamp set. This is a great current hostess set that I love. And we're going to take the thank you greeting from this stamp set. For this part, I'd like to use my Stamp-A-Majig just to make sure I'm lining things up very well. And prior to this video, I went ahead and stamped my thank you. Since I know there's some glare that comes off of this sheet, I stamped the thank you in basic gray. And now we're going to go ahead and use the Stamp-A-Majig to line up that greeting exactly where you want it. And I think you all know how to use your Stamp-A-Majig. If not, let me know. I'm happy to do a little bit of a video on how to do that. I'm going to go ahead and use my basic gray ink and ink up that thank you and go ahead and stamp that. You can always lift up if you want to ink again and stamp again. The great thing about the Stamp-A-Majig is you can stamp exactly over where you just stamped and you get no double effect. Then what I did is I went ahead and I took this really pretty flower image from the same stamp set, and I went ahead and inked that up using both my Cherry Cobbler Stampin' Write marker and my Old Olive marker. If you've never done this before, this is a great way to create multiple colors on your stamped images. And I like to hold the marker at kind of a 45-degree angle and color in that entire portion that I want to be the Cherry Cobbler color. There we go. And then go ahead, take my second marker and get right up to the top of that stem, and then again at a 45-degree angle for coverage, get those leaves all inked up. And now, since the stamp has been sitting for just a little bit with that Cherry Cobbler, what I like to do is give it the huff of life. So we're going to blow on it and then go ahead and stamp it onto Whisper White cardstock. And you've got a really nice dual colored image. Then we're going to go ahead and use a hobby knife or blade, whatever you like to use, and cut that out. I've gone ahead in the interest of time and cut one out already. So I take a little bit of two-way glue, and there are little centers of these flowers, so just little dots of this glue in the center of all of these little flowers, and even elsewhere if you want to create a little bit more glitz. I keep my dazzling diamonds in a little Gladware container. That way it's all contained, although it seems like no matter how much you contain dazzling diamonds, it still goes everywhere. So I'll probably be glittered for the rest of my day. And then just over the container, sprinkle the dazzling diamonds over it and tap, tap, tap with the spoon to give that really nice extra glittery pop to that nice focal flower image. And going to go ahead and just get that all taped up, so double-sided adhesive, and go ahead and adhere that to our Baja Breeze cardstock piece. Try to get that as centered as possible. Looks pretty good. Then I'm going to go ahead and actually use some dimensionals to pop up this piece. I like to use kind of one in each corner and then go ahead and stick one in the middle for good luck. And then center that in the middle of the card. A nice good push. And then again I'm going to use some dimensionals to pop the floral image up off of the card. And then figure out exactly where I want it. I like it hanging off a little bit from that Baja Breeze background. And place it down and you have yourself a very, very beautiful card with a very original and distinct textured gesso background. I hope you've enjoyed this gesso stamping technique. Look forward to seeing you on another day here in the craft room.